Run your tongue along the back of your bottom teeth. Feel the crowding, the one sitting behind the line. That crowding has a date. Around 10,000 years ago, the human mouth started failing. It has been failing ever since. Your dental bills are a receipt for a decision nobody in your family ever made. Start with what a healthy mouth used to look like. Dig up a skeleton from before farming and count cavities. In most pre-agricultural populations, the rate sits near 2%. Modern surveys find decay in more than 9 of 10 adults. Those old teeth were worn almost flat. Grit, tough sinew, raw plant fiber, chewed for hours. The chewing surfaces are polished down. The enamel holds. One side breaks the pattern in a useful way. Gras des pigeons in Morocco, also called Taffaralt. Louise Humphrey and her colleagues published the teeth in 2014. These people died 15,000 years ago. That is well before farming reached anyone. 51% of their teeth carry decay. They farmed nothing at all. They ate wild acorns and pine nuts, gathered in bulk, stored, sweet, sticky, packed with starch. A cavity does not care where the carbohydrate came from. Then farming arrives and the pattern goes global. Wheat in the Near East around 10,000 years ago. Rice in China. Maize in Mexico. Cavity rates climb from 2% past 10, and in grain-dependent groups a great deal higher. Bread carried something else as well. Grain was ground on sandstone querns. The querns shed stone grit straight into the flour. Egyptian mummies have molars worn through to the pulp by the age of 30. The structural change matters more than the holes. In 2011, Noreen van Kramentabedel measured human jawbones from populations across every inhabited continent. Jaw shape tracks diet rather than ancestry. Farming groups carry shorter, broader jaws than foragers nearby. A jaw grows in response to load. Chew tough food through childhood and it grows long. Chew porridge and soft bread and it stops short. The tooth count stayed at 32. 32 teeth now have to fit a smaller arch. Something has to give, and it does. Roughly a quarter of people never form all 4 wisdom teeth. Among those who grow them, impaction is routine. Look at a Paleolithic skull instead. The third molars sit upright in the arch, in use. The surgery you had at 19 would have baffled them. Here is the part that surprises people. Your upper front teeth overlap the lower ones. That overlap is called an overbite, and you probably assume mouths are built that way. Charles Loring Brace went through skulls across many centuries. The overbite turns out to be recent. Before it, the normal human bite met edge to edge, front teeth meeting tip to tip. In Europe, the change appears about 250 years ago. In China, it shows up roughly 900 years back. Brace pinned it on cutlery. Before the knife and fork, you clamped meat in your teeth and sawed the piece off at your lips. That grip wears the front edges flat and holds the bite. Stop doing it, and the upper jaw drifts forward. The bacteria in your mouth changed as well. Dental calculus is hardened plaque, and it traps DNA. Scraped off an ancient tooth, it still sequences. Christina Adler and Alan Cooper published such a study in 2013. Reading calculus from 34 skeletons across 7,000 years. The oral microbiome shifts twice in that record. Once when farming arrives, once during the Industrial Revolution. Each time the diversity drops. The species that dissolve enamel take a larger share. Streptococcus mutans, the main cavity organism, becomes dominant only in the modern samples. People noticed the damage long before they explained it. At Krapina in Croatia, Neanderthal teeth carry worn grooves from something pushed between them again and again. Those teeth are 130,000 years old. Toothpicks worked repeatedly on gums that hurt. At Reparo Fredian in Italy, 2 front teeth from about 13,000 years ago were drilled open and packed with bitumen mixed with plant fiber and hair. That is a filling, 8,000 years before the pyramids. At Mehrgarh in Pakistan, the practice looks organized. Alfredo Coppa's team recorded 11 drilled molars in 9 adults, between 7 and 9,000 years old. The holes run up to 3.5 millimeters deep, cut with a flint tip turned in a bow drill. Several show chewing wear over the drilled surface. The patients lived, and went back to eating.
The second collapse sits much closer to you. In 1700, an English person ate about 2 kilograms of sugar, spread across an entire year. By 1800, that figure had roughly quadrupled. By 1900, it had passed 30 kilograms. British and American intake still sits near that range, with most of it invisible now, dissolved into bread, sauce, yogurt, and drink. The World Health Organization suggests keeping free sugars under 25 grams a day. 1 can of cola holds about 35. Bone repairs itself, skin closes over. Enamel does neither. The cells that build it die when the tooth erupts. Every hole you have ever had is still there, filled with something a dentist picked out. 10,000 years sounds long enough to adapt, for a tooth that is not long at all. Selection acts on who manages to have children, and rotten teeth rarely stop that happening. Decay does its worst after the childbearing years, so selection never removes it. The scale of it shows up in clinics. Surveys across industrial countries find malocclusion in the majority, with a fifth to a third severe enough to treat. Robert Corricini called this an epidemiological transition in occlusion, a disease of civilization written into the jawbone. Groups that kept a coarse diet keep straight arches. The same families crowd within a generation of moving to town. Old mouths failed in their own way. Wear went so deep that the pulp opened, and the abscess that followed could kill you. Skulls from many sites show drainage holes in the jaw where infection had worked its way out. Nobody had a comfortable mouth in the Stone Age. The failure simply arrived from the other direction. One thing has pushed back, and it is recent. Grand Rapids, Michigan started fluoridating its water in 1945. Within 11 years, childhood decay across the city fell by around 60%. Fluoride does not give your jaw its length back. It hardens the surface against acid, and that is all. Farming bought calories and paid in teeth. The same skeletons that carry the cavities stand shorter than the foragers who came before them, with thinner bone and more childhood growth arrest. The mouth records that trade more plainly than other bone. Teeth survive when everything else has gone, and they hold a record of every year of growth. So the crowded tooth at the back of your jaw, the extraction at 19, the retainer you stopped wearing, the filling you got at 11 and never think about. None of it came from bad luck. None of it came from brushing badly. It came from a change in what people ate, made 10,000 years ago by farmers who had no idea what they were setting up, and made worse 200 years ago by cheap sugar. Your jaw is still losing an argument from the Neolithic, and you pay a dentist to manage the loss. Run your tongue along those teeth again. 10,000 years of farming is sitting in your mouth.